Now that you understand fractions, we can have a look at the decimals. Now, the first thing that you need to know is that any fraction can be written as a decimal. So instead of saying a quarter, we can say that's exactly the same as 1 divided by 4, because remember, any line we can write as a division sign, and that is 0.25. Or 2/3 is the same as 2 divided by 3, and that is 0.67, and that will really 0.66666 repetitive, but I've just rounded down to, or rounded it up rather, to 0.67. Okay, that's the first thing that you need to know. The second thing is that any decimal can be written as a number with base 10 to a certain power. So instead of saying 2500, we will write that as 2.5 multiplied by 10 to the power 3. And why? Because we have just moved the comma 3 places. Instead of having it at the end of the second naught, we moved it 1, 2, 3 places to the right, or rather to the left. Sorry, we moved it 3 places to the left, and when we move the comma to the left, then the power will be positive, hence a 3. If we have 0.025, we are also going to write it as 2.5 times 10 to the power something, but now we are moving the comma 1, 2 places to the right, and when we're moving the comma to the right, the power will be a negative, so it becomes 2.5 times 10 to the power minus 2. Furthermore, any decimal can be written as a percentage. So 0.25 can be written as 25%, and 1.5 can be written as 150%. What you need to notice there is that anything more than 1 will be more than 100%. Anything less than 1 will be less than 100%. Okay, so what have we learned now? A quarter is also equal to 0.25 is also equal to 25%, or a third is equal to 0.333 repetitive, or it is equal to 33.3%. Okay, but what we really want to do now is to turn a fraction into a decimal, because that's what we did first. We worked with fractions, and now we want to be able to express that fraction as a decimal. Okay, so what's the first thing we do? We express the fraction line as a division sign. So I've said that to you already. So instead of saying 15 over 4, or 15 quarters, we simply say 15 divided by 4, and we get 3.75. Or, if you don't want to do that in your calculator, or you don't have a calculator, we can change the improper fraction into a mixed fraction. So instead of saying 15 quarters, we say 3 and 3 quarters, and then we simply convert the common fraction into a decimal. We already know that 3 quarters is 75%, so 15 fourths, or 15 over 4, will be 3.75. And there at the bottom of that slide, I gave you some common fractions. A half, if we write it as a decimal, is 0.5. A third, if we write it as a decimal, is 0.33 repetitive. A quarter, written as a decimal, is 0.25. A fifth, written as a decimal, is 0.2. An eighth, written as a decimal, is 0.125. And a tenth, written as a decimal, is simply 0.1. Okay, but now obviously we don't only want to be able to turn a fraction into a decimal, we also want to be able to write a decimal as a fraction. So how do we do that? We write down the decimal and then we count the number of digits after the comma. So in the case of 3.5, there's 1 digit after the comma. In the case of 2.75, there's 2 digits after the comma. And in the case of 5.275, there's 3 digits after the comma. Okay. So if we have 1 digit over the comma, then we write the part that is after the comma over 10. If 2, then we write it over 100. If 3, over 1,000, and so we continue. So now we can write 3.5 as 3 and 5 tenths, and we can write 2.75 as 2 and 75 100ths, and we can write 5.275 as 5 and 275 1,000ths, and then we simply simplify the fraction, or the fraction part of that number. So 3 and 5/10 we'll write as 3.5. 2 and 75 100ths we'll write as 2 and 3/4, having divided both the numerator and the denominator by 25. And 5 and 275 1,000ths we will write as 11/40 by, I think we divide it by, what would that be, 80? Not too sure. And with that, we come to the last slide in this presentation, and that is on scientific notation. We already referred to it in a previous slide, but now remember that any decimal we saw can be written as 10 to the power n. And this becomes very handy when we have to write very big numbers. So if we have a number there like a million, it's got 6 zeros, and so when we write it as notation, it will be 10 to the power 6. 100,000's got 5 zeros, so we're going to write it as 10 to the power 5. 10,000 has 4 zeros, so we're going to write it as 10 to the power 4, and so forth. Okay, so now instead of saying 1,234,000, we can say it is 1.234 multiplied by 10 to the power 6, because we have just moved the comma 6 places to the left. Or 234,000 we can write as 2.34 multiplied by 10 to the power 5, because we have just moved the comma 5 places to the left. If the numbers are really small, like 0.1, 0.01, and up to 0.00001, we look at the position after, and in this case, the position after the comma, in the case of 0.00001, there are 5 positions after the comma. So if we write that as notation, we will say to write it as scientific notation, we have to move the comma that number of places to the right. So 0.1 will be 10 to the power minus 1, 0.01 will be 10 to the power minus 2, 0.001 10 to the power minus 3, and so forth. So example there, instead of saying 0.0025, we can say it's 2.5 multiplied by 10 to the power minus 3, because we have just moved the comma 3 places to the right. Or 0.000064 we can write as 6.4 times 10 to the power minus 5, because we have just moved the comma 5 places to the right. I hope you understood all of that, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I will chat to you again next week. Thank you.